So now your child can't process information because anytime you try that child to learn, he don't have the attention span. And the first thing you must have when you're ready to learn is attention. The second thing, once you have them paying attention, is to teach them concentration. Our children can't concentrate anymore. Why? Because now they're in front of video games. That's their drug. That's their babysitter. That does more to destroy the other factor in their bodies. The same thing with the vitamin A, destroy the myelin sheath in their brain. And that too contributes to their inability to sit still, because remember, when you're dealing with video games, you watch these children, their reaction time is like, damn, how did they do that? And they now you take a child that goes and deals with that and sit them down in an environment where you need to have calm, where learning is something that is an evolutionary process. Forget it. Unless you're teaching at the speed of the video game, they ain't paying attention to you. And that's why I'm saying what I'm saying to you, that unless you teach your children concentration, and unless they are getting the proper nutrition, then you have an enemy to your environment, and a person who turns from, a young brother especially, he turns from a provider and a protector to a predator. Yes, sister. Yes. The Ritalin is again a way of taking what would the natural electrochemical potency that melanin causes. When that melanin starts causing that electrical energy, and remember, melanin is an organizing molecule, brothers and sisters. It organizes all of the components to come together so that intelligence may manifest. When you interfere with the pathways that manifest the lines from that melanin molecule to the extensions from that melanin molecule, once you interfere with that, that buildup of electrochemical, electromagnetic, electrostatic energy is going to start short-circuiting the nerves. I don't want to sit still. He can't help it. So what do? You attack his hippocampus.
When you hear things like a virus, like chickenpox, shingles, measles, herpes, and all that, when it's in your body, it's there for life?
No, it's not there for life. It's there for life if you keep continuing to do the practices and the habits of death. It's there for life. It's actually there for death. If you look at it, right? Yes, sister.
After a woman has a surgery, what can she do to alleviate hot flashes?
Okay, the hot flashes comes as a result, again, of electrochemical disturbance in the body. Women who have hysterectomies do not have their feminine nature, the grounding part of their feminine nature, intact. When you remove the uterus, you remove the battery of feminine consciousness. Okay? She processes her whole being through her body. Feminine principle is deep. Feminine principle, and this is not an aspersion or any insult, the feminine principle primarily feels, doesn't think. And any thinking she does is through her feelings. The feeling battery, or the feeling mechanism, is her womb. Whenever she feels, especially pain, the first thing she does is roll up in a ball. Why? Because that is the center of her being. So when you speak to a sister, you speak to feelings. You don't try to intellectualize when she's angry. Speak to her feelings. The idea now is that your feelings have been attacked. The instrumentality of your being has been attacked. The way to do it, what do? They tell you, okay, take your estrogen. But then they found out that radical, unprocessed estrogen turns into cancer in the breast. So what you have to do now is to realize that your whole body is an estrogen maker, not just this component. There are other estrogen receptor sites, estrogen sites that create. Your hair has estrogen. There are parts of your kidneys, there are parts of the nervous system. all of your body has estrogen creators. The idea is to go into meditation and to activate them so that when you are younger, see, this is what's so dangerous now, because our sisters are now not developing the backup systems. Why? Because the backup systems are being destroyed by what sisters are doing in the yang world. When you got a sister that could jump up and take basketball, now they want to play football, box, and do all of this, they don't realize that they have absconded from the throne of their femininity, because most of these games were established by men to do men things. It's a testosterone expression. It's a testosterone thing. It means that when sisters start turning to testosterone games, that they are being influenced from within by their own testosterone toxicity. And anytime, and you see, in the last 5 to 6 generations of stress that our women have been under, when you start seeing it come out in the other generation, you got to study this as a pathology. When our sisters come out with no hips, when they have, I'm telling you, when you see our sisters come out with no hips, and I'm a watcher, hey, listen, come on. I'm an avid appreciator of the feminine form. I'd be a fool if I was not. But you have to understand that the feminine form, there is a science to the feminine form. And I have a great proponent of studying and understanding and appreciating. And this is no denigration, this is praise. This is praise. You know, I'm trying to figure out why it is that you could look, yeah, I know. I'm trying to figure out why they look at these necrophilic, hungry-looking women, I mean hungry-looking white women, and build them up. Some of these walkway stick figures that they got, what do they call them, high fashion models? Holograms, right. The idea is that the female form was developed scientifically by divine intelligence, and that her form denotes her function. You do not have this accidentally. There is a specific design and intelligence in the functioning, and an intelligent design function in the design itself. If you look at the female form, by design it has the smaller waist, and by design the hips begin to grow. Okay? Supposedly. The reason for the hip structure and the design of the smaller shoulders was to make it easier for her, in her intrinsic basic nature, to mother the civilization. She, by design, has her center of gravity is below in her hips. That's why she walks to the ground. In the old days, I remember that a sister barely took her foot up. It was almost like a skate. I can't do it, but you know what I'm talking about, brother. The one that makes you do this. And the one that the sisters know would make you do this. And there's almost like a sway. They can't help it. It's an automatic sway. It's not even a gift. If it is a gift, it's from the One Most High. The reason for that is to create the equilibrium for her eggs. It's a cradle. See, you don't see that. In the higher metaphysics, the walk of the sister is the nurturing of the potential life. And I use this, and my brothers, and they all know me, when I start speaking about you making, when you start dealing with analogies. You go into a supermarket and you're getting ready to go down to the dairy department and you want to buy eggs. Do you, A, go up to the egg department, take your cart, take your eggs, check to see whether they're broken, then put them gently in? Or do you have your cart over there, you go over here, pick up your eggs, throw them in and hope that they land? Do you aim your eggs and hope that they land in the cart? No. Why? Because they will break. So why is it that our sisters are made to believe that they could participate in activities that can damage their eggs or damage the very, very delicate fiber, which is the fascia and the suspensory ligaments that attach those ovaries to the pelvic area? Once they start doing all kind of crazy jumping up and yang exercises, they turn those very delicate suspensory ligaments into what is known as scar tissue. So what happens is the activities, in order to deal with the stress that they've now encumbered, the body chemistry that creates the progesterone, that then creates the estrogen, the progesterone mutates to create testosterone. And you will see this because the progesterone molecule and the testosterone molecule look almost alike. So it takes a very thin line of behavior to mutate that progesterone into testosterone. But our sisters don't know that the ancient cultural behavioral habits of women staying away from stress, because that's what men were made for. The women staying away from stress, being isolated, you couldn't get to see the women in the old days until you got past the men. The women walked covered. Islam didn't create that. That was something that Muhammad adopted because he knew that all women who were spiritually developed never walked amongst men unless they protected their olfactory lobes. Why? Because they understood that the very smell of a man can trigger them to ovulate. Ho. Ooh. That's how sensitive you were. The very scent of a man. So when they walked, they never looked because even the eyesight could be triggered. If a woman looks upon a man and he is looking good, if she is weak, she can trigger ovulation. Because remember, sexual response is an automatic response. And that's why the women dressed the way they did in front of the men, because they knew, say for instance, when a man is reading, or he's doing problem solving, or mathematics, and he's into whatever he's doing, he is more vulnerable sexually at that time than at any other time. So when the sisters dressed, they dressed humbly and made sure that they didn't mess with his brain. Because if they weren't ready for sex and got him ready for sex, then sex became a pathological exercise. That's when you start ending up with discharges. For the sexual act to come about, there has to be proponents. Different chemicals must be created in the body to protect against the end result of sex. The end result of sex is a man losing that seed. His seed equates to brain fluid. His sperm constitutes his brain fluid. So that's why they say you can't think out of both heads at the same time. You either use one or the other. So when your fluids are lost, that particular material that is used to create the continuance of our humanity is the same material that is used to create the spiritual continuance of humanity. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Why what? Yeah. The brain material is the seed. And so is the seed that gives life. You give life either to heaven, or what they call, to hell or earth, or you take it above the what? Solar, sun plexus, to heaven. Ladies and gentlemen, this is all the Bible ever talked about. Wasn't nobody coming to save your ass. All this bullshit. Brother had a question right here. Yes.
Can you explain it? What do you mean? You trying to say the mothership is coming, or what are you saying?
Well, let me return to basic the primary ingredient here about mothership. A lot of people don't understand what the mothership means. Mothership means returning back or helping to resurrect the feminine principle. They have friendship, mothership. We have taken it out of context. The feminine principle must be resuscitated because she's too busy in the yang direction. That little symbol that you see with the black with the white dot, the white with the black dot? Well, the black has then moved over to the white. And there's nothing over on that other side anymore. We're only operating on one polarity, and that's yang. The last 25 years, they say, you got to be positive, brothers and sisters. They forgot about the negative component. That's how nature operates. Positive means yang, going forward, ripping up to make sure that everything is still continuing. Negative means rest, reflection. We ain't stopped to do any rest and reflection at all. The woman never gets any rest anymore. And you know that there are 2 parts of this month, 2 times of the month when the woman is at her weakest point. She's still working and busting her ass through those times. Your great ancestors would have never done that shit. And if you were bleeding, you would have gone out into the huts where they had built, the women built, so that you would help to regenerate yourself. This nonsense about men being the ones that are afraid of menstrual cycles, that was bullshit. The women themselves were the ones who knew what that menstrual cycle meant. It was the fact that that menstrual cycle was the fall. That was part of the indication of the fall of man. And here, let me get this very straight with you all, too. The menstrual cycle is an indication that the internal power dynamics of the female is distorted. She was the one who actually kept the weather patterns in check. What's happening with our weather, people? You have to remember the Mut force. Anybody ever heard Mut or Mut? Well, the Mut force is undifferentiated power. Now, let me get you something here. The Mut force is what symbol? What is the symbol of the Mut? The vulture. What does the vulture feed on? Flesh, dead flesh. What is blood but liquid flesh? Which is all of the eggs, which is the seeds, which is the cells. Every time you bleed, sister, within I would say a year's period of time, you bleed enough blood, some sisters, to create a whole new human. That is not normal. It is not natural for you to lose your life force. Nowhere is there in the intelligence of the One Most High's mind, nowhere would the One Most High create a function that would represent the destabilization and the degeneration of its creation. The bleeding is a byproduct of our fall. When the great wars of the Neteru, Nibiru were taking place, it changed the whole atmosphere around this planet. And the compressed hydrogen orbit that we had a compressed hydrogen halo that surrounded our planet that kept all of the differentiated energies that would come in from the suns and other star systems from plaguing or messing with the new life forms that were being created on our earth. We were in a kind of spiritual terrarium that was called Eden. In that particular Eden came the wars that caused the fall of this particular hydrogen, this compressed hydrogen halo. It was the fall of the firmament. Where do they depict it in the Bible? And what was it called? No. What was the event called? No. That was the part. But what was the event that created part of the fall? The flood. When the hydrogen halo or the canopy collapsed, it distorted the whole of the balance that Eden had. And it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. It didn't just rain water, it rained earth. And it rained all kinds of madness. It rained it was actually an electrostatic storm that took place when the hydrogen halo collapsed. Now, when that hydrogen halo came down, all of the protection that the human structure had was gone. And what we now operate with, right here, this body that we have now, is a biochemical perversion of what we once were. The different colors that we had, the pure, deep onyx black that gave off the green glow of the green humans, of the blue humans. See, what's happening is we can talk about us as dark folks being perfect because we got that melanin and we looking good and we black and beautiful, but we forget that there was a component to that is still missing. There's the hue that made you the hue man. Now, you may see it in some brothers and sisters like in Africa where they're so black they look blue. That is the components that are missing from the body. See, when we lost the magnesium molecule during the time of the great wars in heaven, We lost the fixing factor that kept the hemoglobin and the chlorophyll together in one body. We were able to process carbon dioxide much more efficiently than we do now. And the reason why carbon dioxide is poisonous to us is because of the fact that we don't have that chlorophyll component in our bodies anymore. Yes, because we fell. And if you look at the way the work to use the word fall, and this has nothing to do, beloved, if you're here new, with Dr. York. This is not his research through me. He may have researched it himself, then that's fine. But I did not get it from Dr. York, and I want that to be very clear to those brothers and sisters who are out there looking at this. I did my own research. Now, when you look at the fall, you look that after the great war in heaven that created the fall of the canopy, that disturbance created 4 environmental temperaments that you call seasons. Because there was only one season. The 4 seasons were created as a form of atmospheric balance to an earth that was spinning out of its axis. We were fixed around this orbit in order to maintain or rescue the life that was here. The little Edens, or these little glass domes and components that were set up to save those from the sun, because there was at least 2 or 3 suns back at that time. And at that time, it was balanced. You had an electrical sun, which is what is the only one that survived now, and you had a magnetic sun, which comprised the balance of life. Now you only have the electrical one, which creates death and havoc. But because we still have part of the component of our skin, we survive longer and better. The Caucasoid came from the caves. And it wasn't until they oriented the orbit around the sun that he could survive. That came up in your Leviticus. He told you who could go back out. Read Leviticus 13, 1 through 59. Now, when you're dealing with the fall, you look at all the seasons, and you take the place where we call autumn. Autumn is the time when Judas, quote unquote, during the time of Cancer, because see, Cancer is Judas in the 12 apostles. The crab denotes what they say as it's called the betrayal, because it's in Cancer that the sun begins its fall back towards winter. So the sun, which is the Son of God, reaches its zenith as well as begins its fall in Cancer. So Cancer denotes Judas, or the betrayal. Again, all this is analogy, brothers and sisters. When you reach that part of the time when you call it the fall season, what are the colors that the leaves become in this atmosphere here? Brown, red, yellow. Those are the primary colors of man. So we are essentially in a season of consciousness. We are in the fall of man. We are getting ready to go into the incubus, or the winter of man, for a season. It's going to be a short season. 20 years. About 20 years. But there will be a spring. And what started that? The hail bop. Which essentially is not hail bop, because like Sister Puma said, the Hopi had said this 300 years ago. They predicted the coming of a specific cometh, not comet, cometh. A China. The Kachina, the blue streaking star, which was supposed to have been a herald of the new time. Now, what did that do? The particular comet that passed us up, and the one that's on its way right behind it, the asteroid, yes, they ain't going to tell you about it, because they don't want you to look up at the sky. They want you to pay attention to what they're going to be doing. Here's the other deal. When that happened, the sun tilted 17 degrees in its axis. And what does that mean? It changed the frequency dynamic of consciousness for us. 17 degree. And what that 17-degree shift in the sun did was shift us at least 5 or 6 degrees. So that now you have El Nino again. This time, worse and worse and worse. Every 5 or 6 years, they say, worse and worse and worse. But guess what? Anybody who's from Mexico or who is Spanish, what does El Nino mean? The child or the little boy. What is the other part of his meaning? It means Jesus. Now remember, I told you that the first pollution on this planet was thought pollution. And thought pollution actually dictates the weather. Now, if the second coming is to rescue us, and Jesus is supposed to purport the second coming, then what's happening with all this weather? And who they say blames it? El Nino. So you got your second coming. It's you, your thought processes, and how you affect the weather, and how that particular dynamic changes the degrees of your consciousness perception, so that you may now filter in the information necessary for you to break this ceiling. But guess what? There are proponents around us that are trying to maintain the ceiling. And that's the enemy. That's the adversary. Yes, brother?
She made a statement about the Pacino.
Yes.
I thought that was kind of interesting because, of course, as lawyers, we do a lot of research,
Mhm.
quoting as you said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
If you're familiar with Esteban, Esteban was the explorer for Europeans.
Yes.
But when he came in contact with the Zuni,
Mm-hmm.
right, the Zuni made a Pacino doll
Yes.
out of the wall.
Yes.
So I think it's kind of interesting
But-
how you're connecting.
But see, how beautiful this is now is that the ship that they just sent up with all that plutonium is the Cassini. And you talk about an analogy and a analog in your voice, or not an analog, but a what is that word when it sounds a synonym, and using like pronunciations. Remember that amount, that's 75 pounds of plutonium or whatever that is now being shot around Venus. It's supposed to be shot around the Earth. If that bad boy dips just by 1 or 2 degrees, we can wipe out the whole population of Africa because they're passing it over Africa. Anyway, brothers, I was given a signal, and sisters, I was given a signal for a time, and if there's any last or final questions. Okay, wait a minute, let the sister ask. Let me just have about 4 more questions and we can go forward. Sister?
This may not be on the topic of what we're discussing, but I just want some advice
Hmm?
on what if you was going to an art school and they lost your whole portfolio. And when you talk to them and ask them what happened to your work, they look at you like you're crazy. Tell you that you never gave it to them. And when you go to the president of the school, the president, you don't get any justice from there, and you don't get no kind of recognition or acknowledgement. And you want to sue them.
Now you have to talk to the Morris brothers on that one. Yeah, we have to talk to them on that. Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, also, you have mentioned something about the menstrual cycle.
Yes.
And I feel you're a very knowledgeable brother, so I don't know if you're aware of this, and now I'm
Mhm.
going to put it out there. Do any of you remember Salem's Lot
Yes.
with Massachusetts?
Yes.
Now, I was listening to a lecture similar to what you're saying now, Phil,
Mhm.
and what hit me heavy is when you started talking about the menstrual cycle of the women,
Mm-hmm.
what the European male did not understood
Mhm.
is when they came in contact with the African woman who was a vegetarian,
Mhm.
she did not believe.
That's
Because
right.
why? You know that the male European relied on blood for his survival. and
Exactly.
protein,
Mhm.
Right? So when at the 30-day cycle, the 28 cycle that the female would give off a menstrual blood, as the white woman did, he recognized that the black woman didn't do that.
Mhm.
So automatically he thought she was a witch.
Yeah.
So he started taking these
Yeah.
particular instruments
Yeah, to start her
womb
blood
to
up.
see if she
Yeah.
could bleed.
Right. And that, you see, the thing about it is the first witch burned was a black woman.
That's right.
Yes.
Right.
The first witch burned in Salem was a black woman. And she was a vegetarian who taught the aesthetic ways of women. In other words, women had a science all their own that made them how powerful they were. You did not do the things that men did because they understood that they would be abdicating their power. Once you take off a skirt and you don't wear the skirt, which is essentially like what's her name said, it's the pyramid. If you look at the skirt, it's the pyramid. And inside of it, you're talking about, well, it's too cold in winter. You layer it. But the pants, essentially, sisters, is made for males because we can create heat better than you can. The heat we have is created because our lungs are larger, so we can combust more oxygen. We have denser flesh. So estrogen is not a very good component of making heat. If you have brown fat in your body, which is made from all this meat and protein, then you could probably make a lot of heat. But if you are a vegetarian, you make more of what is known as the yellow fat, which needs insulation to help you to create the heat. But the yellow fat is better for keeping the organs primed and keeping you nurtured in your womb, and you don't bleed. So there is a science to being woman. And that science is lost because of her pursuit of things that were essentially artificial anyway. This thing called a career. The word career, listen to me carefully, the word career extrapolates etymologically from the word combat. Let me repeat that. If you work and look at the word career and you follow the etymological trail for that word, it goes back to the word combat. I don't have to say anything else. The other question was over here. Oh, no, there was another question somewhere in there. Okay, well, all right, sister. The snake. That is the symbol of the snake. The Kundalini, remember when I said that Adam was perfect? And that they said that Eve was made from the rib? Well, if you look at a cell as it begins to come apart, you will see that there are specific ribs created as it becomes two. The daughter cell is essentially Eve. That's why Eve was created. It's just the separation of the one from the two. I mean, from the two from the one. When Adam was perfect and perfection became his own prison and thus his death, he had to break free. And in the breaking free, he emancipated all potential within him. Okay? That's why Eve was left. Eve is essentially supposed to be the archetypal structure that he attains back to his perfection. She keeps the matrix of perfection by keeping a healthy womb. Sick wombs create sick children. Okay? Now, the Kundalini was introduced into the garden. What was that? The snake. The serpentine fire, the one that agitated with that which was perfect, breaking that perfection to start or to initiate the perfecting principle. So when you begin to see Kundalini and the sexual energies that are used to either feed heaven or hell, that's what Lot is. Lot is the lotus. L-O-T is L-O-T-U-S. The lotus stalk. When Lot's wife turned back, which was the energy that goes up the spine automatically in Kundalini, that's Lot's wife. Lot is the stalk, or the Sushumna, or the Ida and the Pingala nerves, or what they call the River Jordan, which is the seminal fluid and the spinal fluid that goes up the spine. That's what all your Bible is about, is breaking down the map of the human structure. So when you deal with the Kundalini energy going up the spine, if you turn that energy backwards into sexual generation, that's Lot's wife looking back, and thereby turning into a pillar of salt. What is salt? A mineral. What is your sperm comprised of? Salt, minerals. Hello, people. When you get out of the bullshit that religion is telling you, and you get into the science that was the thing that set up the religion, then you free yourself from the last great bastion of slavery, and that is religious ignorance. So, one more question, brother. Okay. Well, I don't doubt it. Remember, there is a war going on to cause our sisters, who they know. You can look at it now. You see our sisters now who are being put next to very strong white anchormen. And they look so grateful being there. Roz Abrams just really pisses me off with that. Cheryl Washington, and there's this grateful acceptance. But you have to understand that the Caucasoid knows that his time is limited on the planet, that he has made a projection that within the next 25 years, his seed will have been completely nullified. Because remember, between 1945 and 1960, or 1990, his sperm count dropped 60%. And it's still going down now. And as a result of that dropping, he now has to find a womb. Now, you got to remember now, the feminist, check her out now. You got to remember that what caused the matriarchy to fall was the womb extortion scenario. We men have one imperative, and that's to continue. That imperative to continue the strain, the individual strain, causes us to be combative and competitive. Competition is a man thing. That's why you all sisters playing basketball and doing all, that is so not you. Competition helps testosterone to be active so that we become better provider protectors. But what happens now is that you have become in that syndrome. You have fallen into that syndrome. Okay? When the time comes for you to, so I'm going to get this real simple so that you could understand it. The physical body of the female has components that regulates its activity from inside. That's why she needs to feel more than she needs to think. Because her structures and her nervous system is so advanced. If that is gone, she becomes susceptible to whatever disease that she can no longer feel is happening in her body. Most women who come to me today say, well, I didn't even know it was happening. It just came like that. If you were back in the times, you would have known when it was beginning. You can tell when you're ready to cycle. You can tell when you're ovulating. The only way you can tell when you're ovulating now is when you get miserable, or when you get agitated, or when there's just something about you that just don't feel right. That's not how you ovulated, sisters. You ovulated because you wanted to back then. Ovulation is so taxing on the body that it was it was not a mandatory thing by no moon. It was something you did when you were ready to procreate. See, that's another science that's gone all together. The sisters did specific types of meditations to start the egg being made. And you made your estrogen another way altogether, because the whole body was the estrogen-making component. Well, the Immaculate Conception is another fallacy that we got to go through, brother, but we don't have the time right now. I done lost my trend. Where was I when I started out? The actual Immaculate Conception is a pathology, okay? Anytime a woman can create a baby by herself, it means she has more man in her than the physical law allows. There is no way for a gynic, pure woman to create the electrothermal dynamics in her body to self-fertilize, unless she has a masculine component that creates that dynamic already in her. Because if you look at the egg, it ain't swimming nowhere. What is it doing? It's just there, waiting to be activated. Now, like I was saying, the man needs to continue. He has an imperative to continue. So womb distortion had it when the women were ruling, that if he needs to continue, he needs a place to continue. Womb extortion had it that if you wanted to continue, if you wanted to borrow this, there are certain things that you must be for me. So you had to prove that you could take care of me and make sure that the seed of this womb can be taken care of as well. So the dynamic of the male is to continue. He will do anything. He'll give you the sweetest rap. He will even stoop to rape because of that imperative. Women knew that, and that's how they controlled. That's when the womb was superior. But see, it turned around and backfired on them. That's when you call matriarchy, patriarchy. There was no such thing as matriarchy and patriarchy. That's bullshit. Whenever the dynamics of survival for a society fell on the hands or the shoulders of one sex, it became a matriarchy. But it never actually started with the feminine principle, because all societies start with war. Today, and about 10,000 years ago, there was always conflict. And it was the masculine conflict, the masculine survivors of that conflict, that established the hierarchy of rule. So if the feminine principle came from that and became queens, it was a result of that. anyone who warred with a queen was essentially warring because they had their dedication to that lineage of rulership. But it did not start with the queen, and that thing about there being a feminine universe, and the universe was feminine, and when the universe is masculine, that's a lot of bullshit. The universe is a balancing dynamic, and it is man that goes through these changes of masculine and feminine power. And we got to get out of that thing where there was primary female rulership, primary male rulership. The both of them were consistent. Exactly. They were there, and depending on the dynamics necessary for creation, that which was matter, all of this, anything that is matter, anything that can be felt and cognized is female. Anything that you use, anything you can consistently perceive of, is female. The activating presence that gives life to that perception and necessity is male. So never in any, and that's what I say about the Moorish principle as well. Some brothers and Moors who are saying that the female is the power, and we're going back into that dynamic again. There's no such thing as feminine power and masculine power. That's bullshit. We're just making another schism because of the fact we can't process that higher dynamic and know that there is a balance of that. And once we understand the science behind the balance, there is no leader or rulership. There's just what must be done to create the balance. With that, I didn't get a chance to cover as... Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, if you look at the dynamic of all the sisters, and if you see some grateful brothers, most of them have to talk nasal for them to actually get over anyway. You are looking at the fact that the Caucasoid knows that he needs to secure the womb of his continuance. The fight between the feminist and him is the fight over womb superiority. The white woman don't want to give him her womb anymore. He got to buy it. So that's why if you look at it, the white man is constantly constructing alternative ways of creating life. He has to do that for his own individual continuance. And what he must do, knowing that he will be absorbed in the next 25 to 50 years, where he is a serious minority on the planet, he has to gain control of the womb that he will survive in. And you now see a serious campaign to bring our sisters into what appears to be parity with the Caucasian man. And you will see that in all of your television programming now, where you see on this other side where all the white folks regulated to one end of the channel and all the ghetto end of the channel. And you see this one girl, I don't know the name of it, but there's this one black woman in this whole troop. And she's just like this isolated mammy figure with this big, beautiful dress, and she's the only black figure there.